Welcome to Future Squared, the podcast all about corporate innovation, entrepreneurship, and self-empowerment. Future Squared brings you a double dose of innovation inspiration every week to help you and your company stay relevant in an era of rapid change and 10x your results in both your professional and personal life. Each week, I'll bring you corporate innovators, entrepreneurs, authors, keynote speakers, and thought leaders such as Steve Blank, David Allen, Brad Feld, Tim Harford, Karen Dillon, Jenny Blake, Neil Patel, Rand Fishkin, Pascal Finette, Ryan Blair, and Ash Moria, to name just a few. While every Friday, I'll bring you Fast Fix Friday, some quick, digestible insights to help you end your week on a high as you head off for the weekend. Future Squared is brought to you by Collective Campus, an innovation hub, school and consultancy based in Melbourne, Australia and Singapore that works with companies to help them adopt the mindset, methods and tools to navigate change and survive and thrive in an era of rapid disruption. If your organization needs help coming up with ideas, testing and turning ideas into reality, incubating teams, driving cultural change, or connecting and partnering with startups, then visit www.collectivecamp.us. And without further ado, here's today's podcast. Welcome back to episode number 187 with Liz Wiseman. Liz teaches leadership to executives around the world. She is president of the Wiseman Group, a leadership research and development center headquartered in Silicon Valley, California. Liz is the author of the New York Times bestseller Multipliers, How the Best Leaders Make Everyone Smarter. She's also the author of Rookie Smarts, Why Leading Beats Knowing in the New Game of Work, and The Multiplier Effect, Tapping the Genius Inside Our Schools. A former executive at Oracle Corporation, Liz worked over the course of 17 years as a vice president of Oracle University and as the global leader for human resource development. Expect to learn 3 key things on this podcast. 1, the 2 types of leaders, multiplier and diminisher. 2, the 5 disciplines that distinguish multipliers from diminishers. And 3, how to create the right environment for multiplier leaders and their people to flourish. So with that, I bring you the one and only Liz Wiseman. Welcome to the show, Liz.
Oh, good to talk with you.
Likewise. It's an absolute pleasure to have you on the show, joining us all the way from sunny San Francisco.
And it's sunny here today.
Well, there you go. Usually when I say that, my guests fire back saying, well, not really sunny. It's kind of overcast and whatnot. So I'm glad to hear the weather has somewhat improved. So Liz, you're joining us because you have released, not just released, you released it a few months ago, Multipliers, How the Best Leaders Make Everyone Smarter. And this is your 3rd book, and super excited to talk to you about this today as a leader of a small organization, as someone who works with a lot of leaders, as to what defines a great leader. But before we get into that, I just wanted to understand what inspired the book. Where did it come from?
Well, I think if you really get to the genesis of the book is probably at its core about me being thrown into management way too early. So I was right out of college, and I had the good fortune of joining a small but rapidly growing maverick software company. And no one heard of it at the time, but the company's called Oracle. And I got sort of there when they were right at the beginning of this exponential growth, and I'm 24 years old. I've got a year of experience now working there, and they put me in charge of training for the whole company and tell me to go build a university.
Wow.
And so I got thrown into management when I was really a child, and from my perspective had no business whatsoever being in charge of anyone else and millions of dollars of budget, because I could barely be in charge of myself. So I went into this job really trying to understand how to be a good manager and how to be a good leader. And I got thrown into working with the company's senior management. And because I felt like I was the youngest one there, the most unqualified on the team, that I really paid attention to what people were doing. And it was a company kind of that prized intelligence. And so they recruited for raw intelligence and drive. And it was a really interesting mix of people. And so I'm surrounded by these really, really smart executives, and I'm watching them. And here's what I notice. And I ended up working there 17 years. And I noticed this throughout my whole tenure there was sometimes the smartest leaders end up dumbing down everyone else on the team.
Mm-hmm.
That sometimes someone's intelligence can be so big that other people end up being small around them. And I ended up calling these leaders diminishers because they often acted as the wet blanket on ideas and innovation, just like ideas die on the vine around these leaders. And I noticed a different kind of leader. They were also highly intelligent and brilliant, that I came to call multipliers. And the reason I called them this is because their intelligence was this multiplying force on the team, that somehow people around them got smarter and more capable and were at their best. And when I left Oracle 17 years later, I hadn't forgotten this observation, and I ended up doing a bunch of coaching. I live right here in the heart of Silicon Valley, and I coached a lot of technology executives, many of whom were brilliant, Mensa level genius type people, but some of them had this way of shutting down intelligence on their team. And I think they realized that it was a pretty costly way of leading. And it was that really spurred me to go in and research this and find out, why is it that some leaders drain intelligence while other leaders seem to amplify it and create a very different dynamic on their team, a very different culture, a very different way of innovating with people around them. That was really what prompted it.
Fantastic. So we've touched on a lot of points there that I wanted to drill deeper into, and I guess one of them was around managers that shut down intelligence of those around them, particularly when it comes to, say, innovation. As you've correctly pointed out, we had a brief conversation before the podcast kicked off about how companies need to get more adept at experimenting and taking small bets. And with, say, senior managers who shut down the ideas of those around them, I mean, today, conventional wisdom around innovation says you've got to encourage wild ideas, and great ideas aren't just something like a breakthrough moment. It's usually the evolution of many ideas and many people coming together and ideas building upon each other. But if I am a leader of a team, and anytime someone approaches me and says, hey, I've got this great idea, and I just say, well, that's terrible, that's never going to work, go back to doing what you're doing, then not only am I going to potentially miss out on an idea that could have evolved into something great, but that person will also, say, fall back into the shadows somewhat.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I live here in the heart of Silicon Valley, and I can't tell you how tired I get of hearing executives offer the innovation by fiat, the decree, fail fast, fail forward, fail often. We hear it in all of its varieties, but just telling people to innovate doesn't actually cause innovation.
Yeah.
You can't innovate by command. Innovation is small, as you said, and requires experimentation. And for that to happen, you have to have an environment of trust, an environment of safety. And these diminishing leaders are often really, really smart people, and sometimes extremely capable and successful, I might add, people and leaders. And other people tend to shy away from them. They're hard leaders to make mistakes around. People want to be buttoned up. Whereas these multiplier leaders, they have extraordinarily high expectations of others, but they lower the bar for risk. They're people around whom you can share a ragged idea. Here's an example. One of the multiplier leaders that I studied that I just thought has a phenomenal effect on his team is a man named Lutz Ziab at Microsoft. And several people on his team said, around Lutz, any mistake is fine around Lutz, but no one would dare make the same mistake twice.
Yeah.
And I think it's this environment which is, hey, it's okay to try something and fail, but you don't get to repeat that failure. It's learned from that. It's true experimentation rather than sloppiness.
And it's about learning from that, but also then sharing those learnings with the organization rather than sweeping that under the carpet. And therefore, you're also empowering other people to take those learnings, maybe build upon them, or maybe also not make the same mistake.
Absolutely.
So you've talked about a leader there at Microsoft, and in your book's research, you spoke to you analyzed data from over 150 leaders. So what kind of organizations were you looking at, Liz?
Well, I started here in Silicon Valley, and I started scrappy and small, and I went to tech companies and biotech companies. The focus of my research was look inside companies for whom intelligence is a competitive advantage. Mm-hmm. They compete on intellect, whether it's IP or sort of academic kind of level ideas. And then from there, I've just kind of branched this out. The original research was done 8 years ago. And what I thought, and this is what really surprised me. There's so many things that surprised me about this research, is I thought that this idea of leader as multiplier to their team might be of interest to a bunch of Silicon Valley leaders, kind of leaders I knew pretty well, and I understood their world. But what's been so surprising to me is that the research
replicates itself very consistently across cultures, across industries. Mm-hmm. And the idea seems to have resonance across cultures and industries. And strangely, the ideas are almost more popular where the ideas are most subversive. Right. Where people are operating under these kind of command and control or almost suppressive hierarchies, is where we find the book is extremely popular, strangely.
Yeah, well, that makes a lot of sense because I can see exactly why. Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, you touched on something earlier which I thought was quite interesting, and our audience would definitely benefit from, which was, oftentimes you hear leaders saying fail fast and fail often and, get shit done and all that sort of rhetoric over in Silicon Valley. But ultimately, unless you create an environment that gets that sort of behavior out of people and makes them, say, safe to fail, then it all amounts to naught. And we see that so often today, where organizations will say that, but they won't address the underlying values, systems, policies, resources, incentives, and everything else to get the best out of their people. So, I mean, aside from, say, making it okay to fail and, don't make the same mistake twice, have you seen leaders actually go that extra mile to, address some of those frameworks and policies and processes in place so that their people can actually step into this sort of position of extreme ownership where they are empowered to try different things?
Yeah, I love this idea of extreme ownership. Yeah, let me give you one of my favorite and most practical. You're absolutely right. It has to get beyond the rhetoric. And it's about pointing people in the right direction. There's a saying in entertainment. I imagine you've heard it, is comedy is big and drama is small. Mm-hmm. I think execution is big and innovation is small. It's about, small bets that become large bets. And one of the practices that I have seen done so effectively is about carving out space. Rather than waving an arm and say, hey, we want you to innovate, be innovative, which is the rhetoric part of it, is pointing people to where they can take these risks. And strangely, pointing people to where they can take risks isn't nearly as valuable as pointing people to where they can't. Here, meaning, hey, you know what? Over in this part of the business, it's really not okay to fail. Like I mentioned, I grew up at Oracle, enterprise software, production databases. It's, experimenting on someone's like high performance production database is not a place where it's okay to fail. The customer, like the hospital, can't go down and you can't respond with, well, bummer, dude. Like, sorry about that. We were trying some new things. We were innovating on your behalf. The most powerful thing a leader can do is to map the business, to map the function and say, these are the parts of the business where it's okay to experiment and fail. And these are the parts where it's not. This is where I have to throw my body over the problem. We have to pull success out of it. Here's my favorite practice. I've done this with so many management teams, is pull your team together and give everyone pens and a pack of Post-it notes and ask them to make a bunch of stickies on where it's okay to fail. And then another set on where it's not okay to fail. Go to a board and make a space for it's okay to fail, not okay to fail. Everyone puts their stickies up there. And then it usually takes a team about 30 minutes of looking at that and debating and arguing and renegotiating until where, like, a team might say, you know what, actually, it's really not okay to fail there. That goes on this side of the board. Or, you know what, actually, we can fail at some personnel decisions. We can recover from that. And once the team gets that mapped out and steps back from it, you can start to develop these patterns about where it's okay and where it's not okay. One of my favorite organizations that went through this exercise was a big global clothing retailer, and they mapped this all out. They were really trying to innovate their product line. They stepped back from it, and they were looking for the theme, like where it was not okay to innovate, experiment, take risks, or make mistakes. And they summarized it in one word. And you might even be able to guess, like, what part of this retail clothing company's business was it just not okay to fail? And the answer was December, which was the holiday season. And,
of course.
And when they looked at this, like, everybody's eyes get big, and the president, it was almost like he issued a biblical decree, which is 11 months out of the year, thou mayest take risks, innovate, change pricing, try new promotions, change the product line. But you know what? Thou mayest not in December. Like, in December, we go steady, we deliver the numbers. This is where we bring in, 80 to 90% of our profits come in this month. And it was this incredibly liberating experience for the team. They're like, we get it. Now we can go back and tell our team where they can point their innovation energy and where it's business as usual.
Yeah, and we've seen examples of that in our work where companies may, say, ring fence systems that they're okay or they're allowed to fail on. I mean, earlier on you mentioned, our HR systems or our big financial systems. We can't just be failing on them because then we'll basically be undoing the core assets of the business and putting everything at risk. But hey, setting up Amazon Web Services and ring fencing certain products that you can actually go out and experiment with that aren't going to harm, say, the core infrastructure assets of the business is one way to go about that. And another thing, when you've talked about, I love what you've said there about identifying where it's okay to fail, but also taking that a step further and maybe defining, hey, what constitutes a failure and how big a failure are we willing to accept? Because oftentimes when we have conversations, say, with senior executives, they get scared of the word failure, but defining to them or asking them the question, how big a failure are you willing to accept? So if you can quantify, well, if it's a 50K loss or a 10K loss, then that's okay. At least then you've got some sort of boundary to say, okay, well, with that money, we can build a bunch of prototypes, we can run a bunch of tests, learn from that, and then go back to senior management and say, here's what we learned, and can we have some more money if the learnings are positive? Or, hey, here's what we learned, let the organization know, share these learnings, and let's move on.
Yeah, I like it. It's like a gambling strategy. It's like, hey, you know what? I'm not a gambler, so you're going to be not impressed with my
I'm not a gambler either.
But I might say, you know what? Hey, you could go, kind of blow $100 and nothing's wrong. But you know what? Once it starts getting over 1,000 and you're losing that, like that actually hurts. Like, at what part is entertainment? That comes from this, and where does that actually start to really dig in? To the bank account, and where does that hurt? And I think specifying those levels, like what sort of innovation at play versus a failure that really hurts.
Exactly, and specifying those levels and metrics also keeps you away from, say, the sunk cost fallacy and saying, well, we've already spent $500,000 exploring this, we may as well keep going. And I guess that's what gamblers often do, which is why it's not such a good idea. But hey, if our audience was to go out and gamble, I'm not going to stop them. Go and do what you want. You're all free people.
Don't double down on it. Don't double down.
That's exactly it. So, Liz, it sounds like a lot of the stuff you're talking about, it resonates with me very much, but I've also heard, accomplished entrepreneurs, whether it was Richard Branson saying things like, I hire people smarter than me, empower them with a worthwhile mission, resources, and I get the hell out of the way. Or whether it's Mark Zuckerberg more recently saying stuff like, I'll only hire someone to work directly for me if I would work directly for that person. And he points to Sheryl Sandberg as being someone that he would have no hesitation working for himself.
Absolutely. Well, who wouldn't work for Cheryl?
Exactly right. But I guess what I'm really trying to get at there is one of the key differences between a multiplier and a diminisher is that a multiplier doesn't, it's not this command and control sort of approach. It is more about empowering your people to go off and do things. So with that in mind, you've identified a number of key sort of disciplines that distinguish multipliers from diminishers, and I'd be keen to explore that next, Liz.
Yeah, yeah, and I'll share with you what we found in multipliers, but there's something that you said that I find is very interesting. I want to pause on this
Mm-hmm.
is, it is an empowering kind of leader, but I think one of the ways that the idea of leader as multiplier gets misconstrued is that people think, oh, for me to be the multiplier, okay, I get that I'm not supposed to be the smartest one in the room. I'm not supposed to act like a smart ass or, suck all the oxygen out of the room. Okay, so my job is to be empowering. So I need to just hire people smarter than me, give other people the ownership, and people start to wonder, like, what's my role?
Yeah.
And I've had so many people say this to me, like, Liz, I want to be a multiplier, but honestly, I'm not sure I like the way that sounds, because then what's my value? And here's the point that I want to pause and try to be clear on, is that leading like a multiplier is not a soft way of leading. It's not an empty way of leading. It's not like, gee, guys, what should we do? I don't know. What do you think? It's about bringing all of your intelligence, all that you have, and bringing that to the team and using your intelligence to know the right question to ask.
Yeah.
The level of challenge people are ready to accept. The obstacles. There's perhaps a world famous basketball player. I imagine he's known in Australia and beyond. But there's an American basketball player by the name. He goes by Magic Johnson. And
of course, we know Magic.
You know Magic. Well, there was a day when he wasn't Magic Johnson. He was Irvin Johnson Jr. He's a young man. He lives in the state of Michigan, and he's a teenager. He's a phenomenal, total phenom on the court. And his coach says to young Irvin, every time you get the ball, I want you can probably guess what he's going to say.
Pass.
You would think.
You would think.
His coach said to Irvin, every time you get the ball, I want you to take the shot.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so he does. Of course, that's what the high school basketball player says to him. He's this phenom. And so he does. He takes a shot. He makes a lot of points. And the coach is happy and the other players are happy, and they're undefeated. And in a typical game, they would have won with 54 points, and Irvin would have scored 52 of those points. And this is going on for a while. They're undefeated, and there's one particular game. The play comes to the end, and the players are all leaving. This is back in the 70s. They're all leaving the gymnasium, headed to the parking lot, probably to get in their Volkswagen buses or something. And this young man, Irvin Johnson, really catches a good look at the faces of these parents, who, of course, came to watch their boys play, and they got to watch Irvin, dominate the court. And he said, I made a decision, then and there, that I would use my God-given talent to help everyone on the team be a better player. And the reason why I wanted to pause on this is I think it perhaps sheds light on this tension between, wait a minute, I want to be smart. I have a lot of ideas, and a lot of companies get off the ground with the genius of the founder.
Yeah. Yeah.
But how are you using your own genius? And Irvin was actually given this nickname of Magic by this sports writer who said, man, he raises the level of play of every team he plays on. And that's how this multiplier effect comes in. It's a leader who brings all of his or her intelligence to the table, but does it in a way that invites everyone else to play their biggest game.
Yeah, and to take that basketball analogy further, I mean, I had a conversation with Sam Walker Wall Street Journal journalist, and also wrote the book The Captain Class. And he found guys like Tim Duncan for the San Antonio Spurs had that similar attribute. You know, the Spurs were so dominant for so long, even until Tim Duncan was in his late 30s. But he surveyed about 600 teams, I think it was, and he found that the best teams in history, like literally over the last 120 years of recorded sports history, he found that what they all had in common was a leader like a Magic Johnson who would empower the rest of his team rather than just take the mantle. And we see that play out even today in a lot of teams where you have a superstar athlete, but the team never really does well in the playoffs, never goes all the way. It's not until you put a team around them. And you could say the same of Michael Jordan in the 80s. Initially he was like the superstar, but it wasn't until he had, his number two man, Scottie Pippen and Horace Grant and everyone else assembling around him, that the Bulls went on and won like 6 titles in the 90s. So it does seem like a common thread here that the multiplier is someone who, empowers his people around him, takes their God-given talent. And like you said, a startup founder, it's their genius perhaps that got something off the ground. But in order to scale and to, affect as many people as possible and take that company as far as it can go, they really need to get an amazing team around them. And rather than just dictate, it's about empowering that team. But before we move on, one thing you did touch on was being a multiplier isn't about being a super friendly sort of pushover manager. You still hold your people accountable, and that goes back to what you were saying earlier where, hey, you can make a mistake, but don't make that mistake twice because I'll hold you accountable to that.
Absolutely. When I sent off the first version of the manuscript off to the publisher, HarperCollins in New York City, and my publisher got back to me, and among many things, the thing that just struck me of what she said is she was so blown away by this idea. And she said, these aren't cupcakes and kisses kinds of leaders. Or someone I heard yesterday describe it as bear hugs and candy. These aren't leaders who are just trusting and empowering and supportive. They're not cheering you on from the sidelines. They're the ones like who are performance, like the coach who's pushing you beyond your level of capability. They're demanding. They have high standards. They have high expectations. For me, all of them, the multipliers that really shaped me are people who I would do just about anything like legal and moral to not disappoint them. Like I wasn't afraid of them. I didn't find them intimidating, but man, would I do anything to not disappoint. Somehow their belief in me and their confidence in me is like, I will not forget being a 24-year-old kid and being entrusted with a multi-million and then a mega multi-million dollar budget to go run this university. I'm like, me? And they're like, Liz, you can do this.
Yeah.
And we really do rise to people's level of expectation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was gonna be my next point. You just prompted my thinking around, rising to the level of people's expectations, and particularly for a multiplier, you do set expectations of people. Whereas if I am a diminisher, then chances are, if I'm working for a diminisher, he's just telling me, or she's just telling me what to do all the time, and getting upset if something isn't perfect and that kind of thing, and not empowering me to, or not trusting in my ideas or what my contribution can be, then obviously I'm not going to really reach that next pinnacle of my capabilities because those expectations aren't being set. Whereas when you were 24 years old, walking into Oracle as a fresh-faced young executive, and you probably had no idea. You probably suffered from what most people in such positions suffer from, which is the whole fraud complex, saying, I shouldn't be here, I'm underqualified, all that sort of stuff. But because those people around you, particularly your leaders, set those expectations, you didn't want to disappoint, and you met those expectations.
Yeah, and when I went back to this VP, Bob Shaver, who was the one who gave me this stretch job, first of all, I'm like, what were you thinking, really? I mean, it seemed like an irresponsible level of commitment. And I talked about this feeling like, not that I had the weight of the world on my shoulders, but that I had a big job and I needed to step up and make this happen. And when you're in a startup environment, everyone's got a big job and everyone's stretching. Yeah, and when I think all entrepreneurs know that when you are running a growth company, every single day you are underqualified for your job. Like every day, that job is getting harder and bigger. And so every day is a stretch for you. And so I was like, Bob, like, how was it that you put so much trust into so many of us who were inexperienced and young and growing? And he's like, Liz, no, no, no. We never like would have hung you out to dry or put you on a tightrope where you could like fall to your death. There were safety nets under there. See, I didn't know that at the time, but see, this is part of it. Just having high expectations for someone doesn't make you a multiplier. Like I could personally enumerate numerous many times when I had really high expectations for someone and ended up having a diminishing effect on them because I hadn't done my job in sizing it. Mm-hmm. See, what Bob explained to me was, oh, no, like we gave you that responsibility like in kind of responsible pieces. Like each one was a stretch, but we weren't going to let you fail.
Yeah.
And I have come through my research and my own experience, I have come to see that one of the most critical roles of a leader and of executive is learning how to size the stretch, learning what is a responsible, bordering on irresponsible level of challenge. Because I've actually completely shut people down and probably sent them to their therapist because I've given them something that was too big.
Yeah.
And maybe because I would want a challenge that big, I assume they would want a challenge that big. And I think it's learning how to size a challenge that's a size or two too big, but not 3 or 4.
Yeah, and that's a great point, and it aligns with what the psychologist or neuroscientist, one or the other, Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, who penned the term flow, where he says,
right.
You do your best work when it's about 4% beyond your capabilities, because it then requires you to stretch a little bit, and that's actually an enjoyable process. You've got the chemical reaction in the brain, it gets everything else to fade away, and you're just sort of hell-bent on getting this task done and doing it well. Whereas if it goes beyond that and you're just incapable of doing it, then you start to question yourself, and like you said, you send people to the therapist because they can't get stuff done, and they start questioning themselves, and they go on this downward spiral. But then on the other side of that is making it too easy, where it's just not rewarding at all. So I guess it sounds like a delicate balance in terms of sizing it up and making sure that the challenges you set are challenges that you believe people can actually overcome.
Yeah, that's a great connection to Mikhail Csikszentmihalyi.
Yeah.
It's very hard to say his last name. His work is, and that 4% in flow. But I don't want anyone to think, oh, okay, I'm going to like 4% out people. That's where you achieve a flow-like state where you're actually performing at your best. Mm-hmm. But that usually comes when you've been given a challenge that's a little bit bigger than a 4%. Like there's probably an ugly, awkward stage where you're trying to sort it out and figure it through, and that you start to close that gap, and then you really start to perform at your very best. And I think one of the important pieces of self-awareness for leaders is, do you tend to be an overstretcher or an understretcher? You can probably guess, Steve, already talking to me, I have a tendency to err on the side of overstretching. Like I'm more likely to break someone and send them to the therapist than to micromanage. Mm-hmm. But some people, tend to err on, no. I usually like to give people like a safe piece of work or something I know they're good at or in their area of expertise. And just know which side you tend to err on, and then compensate. So I have a whole set of mechanisms where I compensate and find ways to get it to what are responsible levels of stretch. For those who tend to be understretchers, go bigger.
Yeah, and
talk to people. Yeah,
and on being an overstretcher or an understretcher in terms of being a leader, I guess on the other side of that equation, in terms of working for, say, a multiplier, do I need to be a particular type of person? Because I imagine not everybody would thrive under a multiplier. Some people perhaps just want to work for a diminisher and just be told what to do and just get that done, do their 9 to 5, go home. Is that fair to say?
Oh, I'm hesitating because I don't think it is fair to say. I have not found someone who prefers working for a diminisher to a multiplier. Mm-hmm. I've been studying for a lot of years, and people describe working for diminishers as frustrating, exhausting, soul-sucking, and I've seen how the damage working for a diminisher does not only to your work and your performance. I've seen how it seeps into people's personal life. It tends to bleed over into a lot of areas of their life. But I will also tell you that a lot of people who aspire to be multipliers and want to lead that way, they give it a shot. And then I call these warranting calls, Steve, because people say, oh, I read your book, or I heard you talk, or I went to a workshop. And I went out and I tried some of these multiplier behaviors, and I did not get the reaction I was expecting. Mm-hmm. People weren't stepping up. I asked questions, and they weren't offering their ideas. And so, like, it doesn't work. I'm like, what might be going on in that case? It might be that you were doing the right things, but still kind of holding diminishing assumptions. It could be that people weren't used to it. See, a lot of people have historically worked for diminishers, and so they spent maybe the early part of their career learning to reset their own expectations of themselves. Like, oh, I'm actually not really supposed to innovate. I'm supposed to execute. Oh, the boss is supposed to come up with the ideas. I'm supposed to implement that. So people have learned. It probably is very consistent with the learned helplessness literature that comes out of psychology. Is people have learned to hold back. That doesn't mean people like it. It's just they've learned to do it, and they've become comfortable in that environment. But I can't find someone who likes it.
Fair enough. No, that makes sense. I guess I'm on your leader who wants to become a multiplier. You talked about it there where, hey, I've read your book, I've heard you talk, listened to you on an amazing podcast called Future Squared, all that sort of stuff. But it's not working for me. So it sounds like if I have traditionally been a diminisher and my team is used to me being a diminisher, that perhaps there is a period of time that it will take to, bring them along for the journey, or to get them to appreciate this new way of working, because they're just not used to it. And they're not expecting me to empower them. And if I do go in and I'll start asking questions like, hey, what's up with Steve today? He's acting a bit weird. Shouldn't he just be, laying down the law and telling us what to do and micromanaging, all that sort of stuff? What's up with him? Is he, Yeah, so...
Yeah. It probably seems kind of strange, bordering on creepy.
Yeah.
And people are going to hold back. So if you have had a history of being more of a diminishing kind of leader, a micromanager, a bit of a tyrant, perhaps a know-it-all, a fast decision maker. If you've got a history of some of that, you've got to earn your way over to the other side of the ledger. And it has to be done in small steps, earning trust from people around you. I will say that there are some people who don't make this transition, and their diminishing imprint has been so deep that people actually don't even trust their attempts for better leadership, and maybe won't even let them go there. I don't want to get sort of too deep on this, but I think we've all probably had a situation where we've been maybe hurt by someone in our personal lives, where that hurt is so deep that you almost don't want to see that person make it up to you, because you're like, oh, no, that. So I have seen leaders who haven't been able to do that other than changing companies. Like, you know what? Fresh start, fresh team. And sometimes that is the case. I think the most important thing maybe for people who are maybe listening and thinking, you know what, I want to be more of a multiplier kind of leader in my organization, either out of perhaps noble attempt, or maybe just pure desperation that, you know what, we're not going to be able to innovate with just a single brain, or we're not going to be able to grow and scale our organization and get to a sustainable place unless we've got all brains operating. That if you aspire that way, I would encourage you not to think about, gee, have I been this tyrannical diminisher, but more to ask yourself, have I been the accidental diminisher? What I find, Steve, is that most of the diminishing that's happening in our companies and beyond, in our schools and communities even, is coming from the really well-intended leader. Not the kind of narcissistic, tyrannical bully type, I mean, they're interesting and they grab headlines, but the diminishing tends to come from people who actually value their people, want their people to step up and want to be empowering. And I've just found that so many of the things that we do that we think are sound leadership actually maybe a little bit more leadership junk food. And a lot of it is having a diminishing impact on people. So, it's asking yourself, what might I be doing with the very best of intentions that's having a diminishing effect? And I could share with you some of the ways I see this happen a lot. Or I don't know, if you ask, you might actually be able to convince me to share a few of my own vulnerabilities at my own diminishing ways.
Well, hey, I'd be keen to understand maybe one little story of your own diminishing ways, Liz.
Oh, well, should I tell you my most shameful? Well, I've already alluded to this. Is perhaps one of my most shameful is I tend to be an overstretcher, and I had an opportunity to work on a book project, and it was a book being commissioned by a publisher, and they very much wanted me to do this piece of work, and I was like, no, I'm not sure I want to do that, and one thing led to the other, and we agreed that I would do this under the condition that I could write this book with my mother. It was a book on educational leadership. My mom is a former principal, and they were, they're like, oh, we can, connect you with subject matter experts to make this easier for you. I'm like, you know what? Actually, this is going to be a really fun mother-daughter project. My mom is a former, headmaster of a school, and this will be great. And I have so much trust, so much belief. Like, I think my mom is brilliant and an amazing collaborator. I hold her in the highest regard, and I gave her this huge responsibility as really my vote of confidence in her. And it was just like crushing and crippling. At one point, we're working on this, and I could tell she wasn't doing well. And I called her and asked her how she was doing. She says, well, Elizabeth, I can't type because my hands are shaking. Oh, wow. I'm so anxious about this. I can't fulfill your expectations on this. And I realized I had this profoundly diminishing impact with the best of intentions. But other ways, I love innovative, creative environments. I tend to be an idea guy. Love to toss out ideas. Hey, what about this? I was thinking about this, and I think I'm just being playful. I'm like, hey, what about this? And let's think about this together. And what happens around the idea guy is that people take their bosses pretty seriously. And they're like, oh, well, Liz wants us to do this, or maybe we should try that. And instead of considering it as fodder for an ideation session, people are taking them as requests. Or I'm a bit of an optimist. And, I'm always kind of reconfirming and stating my confidence in my team. And sometimes people are like, hey, you know what? I know you think this is easy, and I know you think we can do this and that this is a surmountable task, but it's actually really hard, Liz. And we may screw this up. And it's funny. I've learned to say things to my team that seem like things that would be hard for an optimist to say, but I've learned to say things like, guys, what we're doing is really hard. Like if we're on a really tough research project, I'm not sure we're going to be successful at this. Like we're probably going to make mistakes, and we might even fail at this. And it has been strange how liberating that is for the people who work around me.
Oh, yeah.
It's motivating to them. And I'm thinking, oh, that's a bummer.
Yeah.
But they're like, no, it's not.
Yeah, that's so powerful. I've worked really hard at creating an environment of extreme ownership. To quote Jocko Willink, who I'm a big fan of, in my team. And when we have, say, promised to deliver work for a client in the past, and this was in our early days, and we had a big stuff up, and this was our first huge client, but rather than say point fingers at everybody and say, well, you stuffed up and you stuffed up, or I stuffed up, it was more a case of, okay, well, let's sit down and reassess. Let's walk through the entire journey. What could have been better? Where did we screw up? How do we make this better next time? How do we make this better now and go back to the client with some sort of alternative approach? And let's crank it to 11, and if we come out of this and we've lost the client, then at least we know we will have done everything we could have to learn from it and to make it better, and we can move forward. But that process for us, I think it was so empowering because it just set the tone for this environment of extreme ownership where, hey, we might fail, but with every failure, let's take that as an opportunity to learn and get way better at what we do. And it seemed like for me that was such a pivotal moment in the team sort of evolution that now, we don't make those same mistakes, but we still make mistakes. But like you said, at the start of the show, we learn from them and we don't make them again.
Well, even if we're not learning from them, I think there's a tremendous value to getting them off your chest. So I'll share with you something I did last week with my team, and I've done this with other kinds of teams in different forms. It's strangely powerful. So we did a roundup. We got everyone together. We were doing some planning, looking at the quarter ahead, and we did a collection of like a wall of success, a wall of fame. And we just rapid fired. What are all the good things that we've accomplished, that we've done? Everyone likes doing that. We put them on index cards so that people could, brag about their colleagues, brag about themselves anonymously. That felt good. We're just about ready to move on. I'm like, okay, let's do a wall of shame. Write down. And so most people think, nobody wants to do this. I asked everyone to take that index card and write down something that they didn't feel good about, like a miss, something in the previous quarter that wasn't a success, something that they weren't able to move forward or didn't go well, something they just haven't been able to get to, and maybe something that they kind of felt even a little guilty about. And the pens started flying, and people are writing things. I thought maybe people have one or two things. There's this pile of these, and we start to read them out. We all collate them, and then someone just reads them out. And rather than people avert their eyes or just like, okay, let's get through this because Liz is making us do it, people wanted to talk about it. And I was really disappointed. I was hoping I would have been able to do it, but I can't. It was cathartic for this team. And people said, can we do that every quarter? There's something healing about it. There's a coach I know at Stanford. I just am a mile from the Stanford campus. And there's this coach who has always creates failure rituals. I may be forgetting the exact name he uses, but when somebody makes a mistake, they score an own goal. They have a failure ritual, like this big flush sign, okay, let's flush that mistake away and move on. I find that actually drawing attention to these allows a team to move beyond it rather than wallow in it, because everyone knows it's going on, but there's something about saying yeah, I screwed up.
Yeah, it's
you don't learn from it. It's releasing it and move forward.
Yeah, it's so powerful. One of our past guests on the show, who was the head of innovation at a company called Sportsbet here in Australia, and he, like a madman, used to run around the office whenever there was some kind of failure and go to that person's desk, and he'd have this little buzzer with we basically call it a fail button, and he'd press it and it was super loud, but because that buzzer would go off multiple times a day, people became comfortable with the fact that, hey, we're in the innovation team, we're trying lots of things, we're operating in that space where our post-it notes say it's okay to fail, and they just hear that buzzer all the time. And he actually set his team a failure rate, because they were trying some really big, bold experiments, of 90%, because if their failure rate was, say, 10%, then perhaps they're just taking some really, really safe bets. And, that was his ritual. And I've heard of Amazon or divisions within Amazon holding, say, monthly failure award ceremonies where people who run an experiment, fail, learn from that, share those learnings, qualify for this award. And it's about getting them on stage and saying, hey, we tried this, here's what we learned, it was a very valuable learning. But just by turning it into a ritual, rather than trying to sweep it under the carpet and pretend we're all, Superman and Wonder Woman, it's a very cleansing thing and can only be good for organizations who are operating in that space, which pretty much every organization is today, where they need to be innovative and they need to be trying new things.
Yeah, and I would encourage people to take a very lighthearted approach to this. Back when I was at Oracle, one of the things I would do, And maybe because, I like anything to like lighten up the mood is I would start my staff meetings with screw up of the week.
Hmm.
And we're like, okay, who's got the screw up of the week? And someone would say, oh my, I went into a meeting and like 5 times called this guy by the wrong name. And we would laugh, not with the person. I mean, I think we were probably laughing at them, but everyone enjoyed doing this. It was
Yeah.
like we would laugh and we would move on. So people don't harbor shame. They don't dwell on it. Learn, move forward.
Yeah, exactly right. Liz, we are just about out of time, but have you got 3 quick minutes for our lightning round?
Lightning round. Let's do it.
Let's do it. So question number one, Liz, is if you could work for any organization at any stage of the company life cycle, so we could be going back to Apple in the mid 70s, who would it be and why?
I I would go back and work at Oracle in the early days. For years, I missed this thrill of what we were doing was
Yeah.
huge and everything that you did mattered. Like a chance to go back and even spend just another month in that environment, I'd take it in a second.
I
I'd take it over Apple early days working with
yeah.
Steve Jobs.
Yeah.
I'd go back to it.
Awesome. I had a feeling you would say that, given that you were there during the formative years, which is always a thrill for any entrepreneur or anyone working in that sort of environment, particularly at an Oracle, which went on to be one of the biggest companies in the world. But question number two is, if you could ask anyone a question, dead or alive, Liz, who would it be and what would you ask?
Wow, there's so many people. I, I think you made me think of Apple, and I get asked a lot about Steve Jobs. Was Steve Jobs a diminisher
Mhm.
or a multiplier? I would tell you there are people who absolutely would swear, like the media and the stories about him are that he's very much a diminisher. The people who worked close to them would say, "Oh, he was one of the greatest multipliers out there." I would ask Steve, like when did he discover um, the toxic effect he had on people? How did he correct it, and did he go far enough, or would he have done things differently in how he led? But I miss his brilliance.
Mm.
I miss the things that they created because of it. Yeah, he might be one I would want to ask a few questions of
Yeah.
too.
Yeah, that's great. And he's probably the most popular response we get. Oftentimes people say, well, I'd love to ask Steve Jobs what he would make of Apple today and the direction they've taken and all that sort of stuff, which would be fascinating to hear. And lucky lastly is, as a author, you've just published your third book, you're a speaker, coach, doing all sorts of amazing stuff in the world. Do you have any rituals or routines to help you stay on top of your game?
Oh, routines to stay on top of my game. I run daily, which
Hmm.
is a real thinking exercise for me. Well, I would say I have a practice. I don't know that it would qualify with ritual or routine, but I have a practice that
Hmm.
really helps me a lot. Is I call it the naive yes. And my naive yes is I don't overthink things. When people ask me to do something that's hard,
Yeah.
I play stupid. And instead of saying, well, tell me what that means, what are you expecting? I don't think about how I'm going to be successful. I just say yes.
Hmm.
And I have said yes to some really crazy things. My husband's always shaking his head going, you didn't really tell them you could do that. But that's my practice is I just say yes before I think of reasons to say no. And I don't mean say yes to everything and every request,
No.
to hard things. And I find that practicing the naive yes keeps me at the top of my game because I'm in continual learning mode and I'm getting access to what I call rookie smarts.
Yeah, exactly right. And I think if you overthink every potential thing, it's only going to slow you down and potentially make things a lot more complex than what they need to be. And I think one of my favorite sayings is worth doing is worth doing poorly until you can do it well.
I
And,
love it.
we've touched on that sort of concept today a few times where, hey, it's going to be tough initially, but you're going to break through and then you're going to get into flow. So thanks so much for giving up some time to appear on Future Square. Liz, this has been a great conversation. People can pick up a copy of the book on Amazon. They can also find out more at multipliersbooks.com, where they can also take the extreme question challenge to see what type of leader they are, which I think is, I haven't taken that myself myself. I'm going to take it right after this talk, Liz, so I'll let you know how I go. But they can also hit you up on Twitter at Liz Wiseman, and they can find out more about the work you're doing at thewisemangroup.com. Is there anywhere else they should go to find out more about you, Liz?
All of those places are good. When you go to multipliersbooks.com, I would encourage you to look at the Are You an Accidental Diminisher quiz. It is 10 questions. Mm-hmm. It's a 3-minute quiz. And I hear over and over from people that it is strangely powerful and how insightful it is about some of your diminishing tendencies. So it's a simple quiz, but it might have a big impact for you.
Awesome. Well, we'll link that up in the show notes. Thanks again for appearing on the show. Any parting words of wisdom, Liz?
I don't know about any parting words of wisdom, but I will leave you with this thought is, as you grow your company, decide which role is more powerful, being the genius or the genius maker.
Love it. Love it. Thank you again, Liz.
Cheers.
Hey guys, it's Steve again. If you're picking up what we're putting down, we'd love it if you took just a minute of your time to like, share, or subscribe to Future Squared on iTunes, SoundCloud, or Stitcher. It would mean a hell of a lot to the team here who work effortlessly to bring you thought leaders and experts on topics of corporate innovation, entrepreneurship, and self-improvement on a weekly basis. As always, you can find more resources on innovation, including blogs, books, podcasts, videos, webinars, and tools at www.collectivecamp.us. If you'd like to connect with me on Twitter, you can do so at Steve Glaveski. That's Glaveski. Until next time, keep innovating. Future Squared out.